All right, ladies and gentlemen, I assume you're all refreshed, caffeinated, ready to push through. In our last session, we talked about how leadership from the top could help change attitudes, about how corporate culture and policies and messaging can help change hearts and minds. Sometimes, as we heard, bosses have to push against more conservative elements within their own company. But what about outside the company? All companies operate within their given society and have to navigate cultural and political and religious barriers. Now, how should a company deal with those obstacles? How should a company break them down? I'm going to first discuss these questions with Dr. Qingyi Lin, a doctor and legislator from Taiwan, and she joins us, I hope, from Taipei via video link. Yes. Dr. Lin, thank you for joining us.
Hi, hello.
Hello. You can hear me all right?
Sorry, I can't go to the... Yeah, it's all right. It's okay.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's start off with some context. Tell us about the state of LGBT legal rights in Taiwan and about cultural attitudes as well.
Okay. First, I want to discuss about the LGBTI issue during campaign. As you know, we have a president and legislature campaign last year. And for my party, the LGBTI issue and another human rights issue very important for us. So even during campaigns, very few people will discuss about the LGBTI issues, but we still go to the Taiwan at the Gay Pride. Our central quarter of my party and our secretary general and our members, we go with our LGBTI members to discuss about we will do what we should do after we win the campaign. So this is why last year after we empower my party empower, we take the law to the draft to some action. I will say some the past 10 years Taiwan we have the same-sex marriage law action. Actually, during 2007, this is the first time our legislature discussed about the same-sex marriage, but it's a special law for gay and lesbian. So during that time, the groups and not only support groups, all other against groups, they against this kind of special law. It's during 2007, and until 2012. My colleagues, legislators, she took another draft to talk about marriage. So we want to change the law to become that the same sex have the same power, the same right to get married. What? But also during that time, because my party have a fewer members in legislative yuan, so it's a little difficult. And this year, after we empower and we got more members in legislative yuan, so we have take the draft to our judgment and lower organizations committee. During that time, I have some story about here is in Taiwan we have every year we have Gay Pride, and we take the draft before the Gay Pride. Is really to want to answer and to back to our LGBTI people, friends and all the friends support the human rights. We are really want to push this law. But after the Gay Pride and the law draft was being proposed, we have many highest the confliction between against and support groups. So we have many times the conflicts. The against groups they come to legislative yuan and ask us to stop the review. And another, our support groups, they come here to ask us to support the review. So until now, our law organizations, the committee, they just finished the review at December 2000. Then now our step is we are need to go into the parties consultation time.
Sorry, can I
The
interrupt you?
parties'
Do you mind if I interrupt you
consultation
for 1 second
time
and just ask you a question? The groups that are opposed to same-sex marriage equality, why are they opposed? What is the source of their opposition?
Yeah, the opposition groups actually, I thought actually the simple is the words is that they really have a homophobia. There's one leader against groups to our public area, and this writing is gay is infectious disease.
Is this a religious-based opposition?
So they're thinking that. Pardon?
Sorry, I asked does the opposition stem from religion, from cultural issues? What's the root?
Yeah, they have the religious segment, and at the same time, but they are trying to play friendly type, but actually it's not. They say they are friendly to gay, so they are trying to keep their patients and the kindness to treat them. That is opposite side groups thinking. And another, we actually have many opposite groups. They say they are family friendly, children friendly, parent groups to against any action for same-sex marriage law or gender equality education law. This is now Taiwan's condition.
So the flip side to that question I'm curious about is that there's religious opposition in many, many countries, but in very few countries, in Asia especially, is the fight for same-sex marriage equality being fought as strongly. What is the source? Why do you think Taiwan has become so progressive?
I think first, to pushing same-sex marriage is a gender equality issue. Is go through with our democratic, because all our friends come from they focus on human rights, they focus on democratic progression, and gender equality issues actually is the same value for this country. So we work it together. This is why, just like you said, we have a so fast step for same-sex marriage.
And so in Taiwan, you found that the fight for same-sex marriage equality is bound up with the fight for gender equality.
You said fight for gender equality is also fight for same-sex marriage.
Yes.
Yeah, actually.
Yes.
Yes. And the opposition time actually we said Han Dynasty and the against the feminist. So in traditional thinking in Taiwan, actually they really have the culture come from mainland China. So they still think, they still believe men, women have family and need to have children. So actually these groups are against gender equality, against same-sex marriage, against human rights, against the multi-value of these new generations.
So have you found allies? Can I ask? Have you found allies in the business community? Have you found allies in the business community? Has the business community fought with you or against you? Where have they stood?
Business community actually except from these issues. So many Taiwan's populations, not these extreme groups. One group is the LGBTI groups and the human rights groups. Another group is the against groups. And most of populations, about 80% people, they actually just wondering why are you confliction? they thought it's not the most important issue in Taiwan. And most of they were said, what we need to do is to improve our economic condition.
Okay.
Of course, some part of the same-sex marriage support and our friends, they will say that gay economics is actually the new thing in Taiwan. But I must say it's just some part of these issues.
Okay, thank you very much. We're about out of time, but thank you very much, Dr. Lin, for joining us. I'm very grateful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I'd like to invite up the rest of my panel, if I could. We have joining us, yes. This is Perrin Chua, a lawyer from Singapore and the spokesman for Pink Dot, the biggest LGBT event in Singapore. This is Pauline Ong, who is the executive pastor at the Free Community Church, which is an ecumenical Christian congregation and the only openly inclusive congregation in Singapore. And this is Oyungerol Sedevdampa, who is the former Minister of Culture, Sports, and Tourism for Mongolia. Now, Minister Sedevdampa, I'd like to start with you, and I'd like to ask you a question. You were very open when you wrote to me before in saying that you yourself had LGBT prejudice and you overcame it. I wonder if you could talk a bit about that.
Yes, I became a human rights activist after I grew up as a daughter of a communist ideological worker. During my student time and before my 26 years old, all I knew was a closed communist society, and we believed in communism. But when democracy started when I was 26, I joined the democratic movement just because I loved the word human rights. And in my family, there was lots of people who were repressed during communist time. So I actually became one of very active human rights activists in Mongolia since 1992. And in 2009, I was appointed as the first ever in Mongolia position as a human rights advisor to the president. When I worked there, I was approached by all kinds of communities and groups whose rights were violated, and one of the community that approached me was LGBT community in Mongolia. In 2009, after 17 years of working as human rights activist, I was still very much prejudiced against LGBT people, and I was kind of shocked. But my public office was to protect human rights, and then I realized that I actually excluded some humans out of the scope of human rights until now, so I was very embarrassed. I actually changed my prejudice just because I was so embarrassed that I was calling myself human rights activist till then.
Now, how widespread is anti-LGBT prejudice in Mongolia?
It's very quite...
And what does it stem from?
In 2009, when I was working there, the reason they approached me was that they wanted to register the first ever LGBT rights NGO, and the government didn't want to register it, and the Ministry of Justice on the National Registration Office were saying that we don't want to use the word LGBT into Mongolian legal rhetorics, that we don't want to register this organization because of the name. So actually it was my job to convince the administration, the government administration, to accept the word of LGBT, lesbian, gay, transgender, and bisexual as just a normal word that can be registered for the rights organization. Actually, my letter, two pages letter, was firstly educational to me, because I used lots of resources to write that letter. Secondly, it was educational to the government branches that they, immediately, in 24 hours, they registered that organization, that they were denying their registration for 3 years before that.
What was the argument you used that won them?
Three arguments that they were rejecting to register the organization. Firstly, they rejected the words. All the words were foreign, they said. And secondly, the argument was that this organization will bring bad behavior role model for young generation, that they will pollute the young generation. The third argument they said was it's not Mongolian tradition to encourage these kind of people. So that were the three arguments, which was actually also the foundation of my prejudice. And I actually educated myself and read what are the other arguments. So I found out that in Mongolia there were millions and thousands of organizations that had foreign names, like Mongolia's biggest companies like MCS, there is nothing Mongolian in that MCS. and lots of companies had foreign names. So I argued that actually in Mongolia, the famous, most respectful companies and organizations, many of them had foreign names. Even Mongolian people have foreign names because we gave names on occasions. Like if somebody is born on October holiday, he can be named like October. So we have lots of foreign names. So that was the argument. Second argument I used is actually lots of things in Mongolian are not so traditional. We accepted democracy. We accepted lots of things that is not so traditional. So we accept the rights also. Actually, Universal Declaration of Human Rights itself is not so traditional to any country because it was all countries got together and adopted it in 1948. So I argued that way. And thirdly, I said, so if we actually do the violations against them and encourage the beatings and brutal physical abuse against LGBT people by not giving them right to defend themselves, actually then we will actually give bad behavioral role model to our young generation because they will be grown up seeing and accepting and actually seeing the violence as a just normal thing. So actually seeing the equality as normal thing will give better behavioral role models.
So the government was open to persuasion, to logical persuasion?
Actually, they accepted that organization and registered that within 24 hours. So that was a very quick persuasion.
That's great. What has been the effect of having the center? What is the center's role in Mongolia?
Whose role?
What has been the effect of having that center on LGBT people in Mongolia?
Openly, it just opened up a dialogue.
Yes.
It just opened up the issues that we were avoiding to discuss.
Yes.
And also, this organization is one of the pioneers of rights organization.
Yes.
That's why many rights organizations were founded, and Pride Day became just one of the events
Yes.
that people go. Actually, I'm the only politician who goes to Pride event. Lots of politicians in Mongolia talk about human rights, but they are in my 2009 situation so far. They are talking about human rights, but not appearing on the Pride event yet. But things are changing. Rhetorics are changing. I occasionally tweet about the issues of LGBT rights. And in the earlier years of tweeting in Mongolian Twitter community, I was like harassed. As soon as I tweeted just one word about it, and then I would tweet after a certain time, and I would get less harassment. But today, I'm just like tweeting every other minute, and people are like, "Oh, hey, I want to know more," you know. So it's really society is changing.
The politicians who don't go to these events, the ones who you say are stuck in your 2009 mindset, what is it that keeps them there? Is it religion? Is it adherence to tradition? What is it?
It's a lot of things, but very pragmatically, PR advisors are not encouraging them. I personally received PR advice from paid PR services, and one of my very good PR advisors said, "Oyuna, we accept you as a human rights activist for a long time, but just don't ever talk about LGBT rights. We will never be elected." In fact, I wasn't elected in 2016, but sometimes I like to follow a PR advice, sometimes I want to reject. So if I lost the election in 2006, Still, I keep talking about the issues that is important, that will be important for Mongolian future, because what worries me now most is teenage suicides in Mongolia. Nobody's talking about it. Why? Nobody discusses the issues that teenager had to end her life or his life without discussing anything with anyone. So I see lots of younger generation people worrying about their own peers. I actually had help from 17 years old Namun Onong. She saw her generation's tragedy, and she wanted to collaborate with me on defending human rights of LGBT people and opening up this subject so that no more teenagers end their lives without unknown reasons to their parents and friends and to society.
Thank you. I think before I move on to Pauline, I'd like to introduce our third polling question. Can I ask you to put it up on screen? This is also on your app. It's a yes/no question, as the other ones were. Do you think the rise of populism in the West, and I suppose it's not just in the West, do you think the rise of populism will curb progress on LGBT rights? It's a yes or no question. You click submit at the bottom of the app, and then we will come back to this later in the session. But let's turn now to Pauline.
Yep.
You are the executive pastor at a Christian church.
That's right.
How would you characterize the attitude of Singapore and Singaporeans to LGBT rights?
Wow. I think we have a whole range of different responses that people have. But I think the difference is who gets heard and who isn't being heard. You know, we have a very vocal minority, Christians as well, and different religious groups who might be very anti-LGBT, and that gets heard really loudly. You know, unfortunately, I know a lot of more progressive religious people, you know, and I've had dialogues with them, I've had coffee with them, we've talked about different issues, you know, about LGBT and being Christian or being Muslim. But the thing is that a lot of them are silent. I would call them the silent majority in Singapore, because while they are moderate, and they would identify themselves as moderate and accepting to a certain extent, they're still trying to formalize and crystallize some of their own stance about the issue, and they're not willing to come out in public, at least on the public sphere, to say what they really think or feel, you know, because that's difficult. You know, you have to deal with the opposition, you have to deal with what people are going to say to you, and so I think that's the issue in Singapore right now.
I think that's not just an issue in Singapore, it's an issue everywhere, that you often have a very vocal minority and a very vocal sort of progressive vanguard. But the question is, how do you, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts, how do you mobilize the sort of what you might call the moderate, well-intentioned middle?
And that's a really good question, something that Perrin and I were just talking about just earlier, you know, because I think that is the key, really, to progress and to having things move in our society. And right now, where it is, a lot of it is being engaging on a one-on-one kind of level, you know, and maybe on certain panels, you know, if we get to be invited, if we get to organize some of these dialogues, you know, we get to do that. But I think, to a certain extent, there needs to be a little bit more intentionality around it. You know, not only am I going to sit down and talk with you about this, perhaps, you know, even from my point of view, through my story, could I perhaps, you know, encourage you to take a stand, encourage you to be part of something, you know, that is willing to say, you know what, we may not completely agree with that part of that minority of society. I mean, you know, there are other thoughts that we have here. We have more balanced views here. You know, to perhaps create, you know, a platform where we all can kind of express that a little bit, you know, so that we have a diversity of views as well in our society, and then we're not just listening to a minority of views.
Now, you mentioned your story. You identify both as gay and as a Christian.
That's right.
What is your response to people who say that is against Scripture?
Wow. Yeah, a lot of people would say that's a contradiction in of itself. You know, it's against Scripture. How could you be gay and Christian? You know, and the thing that I would say to most people, you know, when they tell me that, is that I totally understand where you come from, because that's what I thought of myself before. You know, when I was growing up as a teenager, that was when I became a Christian. I started realizing and also discovering that perhaps I'm different from my peers. You know, so I was, you know, my sexuality and my spirituality was intersecting at about the same time. You know, and I realized that both were very important parts of who I was, things that I could not deny. of myself. And I thought that if these two couldn't coexist, and like what you said earlier, and thank you for that, about teenage suicides, if these two could not coexist and it was a contradiction truly, then perhaps I could not exist, not authentically, not as a person. And so I understand when people say that, because they take very traditional views of scripture, and, or at least what they've thought, they've heard from the pulpit over the years. But over the years, on my own journey, I've explored scripture. I've gone to a very conservative seminary, by the way. But it was actually in seminary that I reconciled my theological views and my understanding of who God is. That God is so much bigger than our human minds could even begin to contain. And all these things that we say about being gay and Christian, a lot of it we have not explored in a deep way. Especially for a lot of the religious people, we repeat what we've heard rather than actually really doing the research, really going to read, really talking to people, understanding what their experience of God is as well. And I can tell you that where I am now, I used to think I was a contradiction, but I would say where I am now after many years of trying to figure this out is that what I have is a gift. That this intersection, that this is a gift. Yeah.
How do you maintain that tone in the face of sort of vicious attacks on who you are? How do you maintain, keep responding to people with love and patience? How do you do that?
Absolutely. Because I think at the heart of Christianity and any actually religious background that we may come from, at the heart of spirituality, is that God is love. And that if we truly embody who God is, if we truly embody what spiritual values is, that it is love that we carry with us. And so in the face of opposition or perhaps ignorance, sometimes a lot of hurt because of what people say, I really believe that the only way that things can really progress is if we come back with a loving response, a fair response, of course, one that speaks our truth, but one that's always loving. Yeah, and that's important to me.
And let's move away from the sort of religious sphere for a minute. As some of you in the audience may be aware, sex between men is still illegal in Singapore.
Yes.
377A.
That's right.
Now, the government doesn't enforce that law, but in effect, all gay men in Singapore are unindicted criminals, free at the government's pleasure. It's just true.
It is.
Have you taken a public stand to oppose it? Are there dangers in being a sort of being a fighter in the political sphere?
Well, I think that's something that we are all working on together to think about how we can take a public stand on this. But what I can tell is a story, about how I've taken a stand on it, especially to people who have, spoken up about it. Quite a number of years ago, I had a group of Christian friends, and that was when the Singapore Parliament was debating about the 377A issue and whether to repeal it. And so we had different Christian groups and a couple of friends, and these were some friends that I had been close to for a long time ago, but I had not come out to yet. So there were a number that I've come out to, but a number that I have not. And so I got this email from them, and it was a group email, and they were saying, let's protest against the repeal of 377A. And they gave a whole argument about that. And at that moment I knew that I had to respond. I had to come out. I had to talk about my experience with them, because a lot of the languaging often, in this whole, sometimes this cultural debate is us versus them, right? And that was what I was really picking up, through what people were saying. And so the thing that I wrote back, and decided to reply all, so it goes to everyone who's in the list, and I shared that, you know what, when you say all these things, I am both us and them. And I can understand where you're coming from, but I need you to know that when you say these things, the young people in your congregations, the young people around you in your families, when they hear you say these things, you are actually talking about their lives. You're not actually talking about just your own views or your own convictions, your own beliefs. You're talking about their lives. And it has a significant impact on our lives, because you're telling us, and I may not be a gay man, but I stand with my LGBT community. You're basically telling us that we're criminals just because of who we love, and that is incredibly sad for me to think that in this day and time that we're still telling people that, and so I think it was really important to share that journey, and I shared this story because what happened was I hit send, And I was like, oh, I don't know what kind of like emails I'm going to get back from that, right? And my very first reply came back, and it was quite a good friend, and he said, you know what? When I first read your email, I was so shocked. I had to read it again, because he said it blew his mind to know that I was actually gay. Because he had seen me, he had served with me in ministry, he knows me as a friend, as a person, and I went against all his gay stereotypes, and that was what started to change things, to change the conversations. And he said, even though I don't agree with where you're coming from, but I still, you will always have my love and my respect and my friendship. And every other email that came after that, they were similar in tone. And that gave me hope. It gave me hope that we have a community of people that at least are thinking, they are willing to accept, willing to at least dialogue, to actually, when they start to know someone who's personally close to them, a family member, a friend, that it makes that difference for them. It changes the whole conversation for them.
So that's sort of key to breaking down political and religious barriers,
so.
Living openly in one-on-one sort of personal contact.
I believe so. And one of the things I often tell people is that those of us who can, we need to come out. And the only reason for that is because until someone knows someone close to them who is LGBTIQ, it will always remain a debate, always remain an argument, in your head. But until you know someone who's close to you, a friend, a daughter, a sister, a brother, a cousin, it changes the whole argument because you're talking about a person's life. You're talking about the complexity of humanity, actually, and that changes things. Yeah.
Thank you. Perrin, let's turn to you.
Yes.
Give us an introduction to Pink Dot first.
Well, Pink Dot started in 2009. Back then, it was a different climate. Singapore was a different place. Anything LGBT was very taboo. You can't even mention it publicly. There was a little gay movement, but it was all very underground, and every gay event was ticketed and indoors and in clubs. So, background to Singapore again. I think besides 377A, we also have a law against free speech. We have a Public Order Act where anyone that wants to rally or have a public assembly or to promote a cause, you need a license. And you're not going to get a license for anything LGBT. And then in 2009, we have a space called Speaker's Corner. Before 2009, to use that space, you need to get a permit to use that space. So that space is not used because no one's going to ask for permission to protest. So they changed the rules and said all you need to do is just register as long as you do not speak on race and religion. Big taboo topics in Singapore. You can talk about anything, but even in our only space for free speech, we cannot talk about race or religion. You can use that space. So we decided to start this thing called Pink Dot. We knew at the time that people are not open they don't dare to come out in public, and Singaporeans are a weird bunch. We don't march back then. We don't protest. We don't do anything uncomfortable. And so we like, okay, and it's only a park, so we know we can't really march. So say, okay, so what do we do? Let's form a pink, get people to wear pink and form a human dot. And this dot will represent society's acceptance of LGBT citizens. And hopefully as the dot grows bigger and bigger and bigger, then you can signify that society is more accepting. Therefore, showing the authorities that we are not as conservative as we are made out to be. So the idea of Pink Dot really was to bespoke tailor to the weird psyche of Singaporeans. And the first year, people didn't want to come because nobody, Singaporeans don't own pink clothes back then. And Singapore's very hot, so no one's going to go in the middle of the day in a park, wear pink, and form a dot to take a photo. It just goes against anything Singaporean. So we thought, maybe we'll just get 200 people to come for the first year. Then we had 2,500 people who came in from a very, very modest dot. And the dot grew and grew, and at last count, it was 28,000, which shows that, and I hope that it has made LGBT more open and less of a taboo topic. So that is how it started. The main aim of Pink Dot is to change hearts and minds of Singaporeans so the society can evolve. And we believe that when society evolves, laws will change accordingly. So Pink Dot really is we're dealing with the social aspects of being LGBT in Singapore, bridging the straight community, getting more straight allies with the LGBT community. Yeah.
And the response from the business community has been quite positive. What about from the government?
So the government has always maintained that they're not anti-gay and that they value all their LGBT citizens, or they value all citizens, including LGBT citizens. They're more afraid of relaxing the rules of public assembly, I think, and they are very mindful that because they see LGBT issues as an issue of public controversy, and we have had lots of opposition. In 2014, so the religious Christian, conservative Christian groups have always been opposing us, and they've been making noise all the time, but it has been, it's just been there, and it's always going to be there. Nothing going to change. In 2014, the conservative Muslim right joined the Christian rights to go against LGBT, go against Pink Dot. So
you're making allies.
Yeah,
you're forging alliances on the other side.
Yes, the Christians and the Muslims have for once agreed on something, and it's all against gay rights. And that was the year where we have received unprecedented media coverage. Before that, we had to beg for a press space in newspapers, because we have MDA, our media guidelines prohibits and bans all portrayals of LGBT that are neutral or positive or glamorizes what they call, it's in the guidelines, the homosexual lifestyle. So, so editors have to talk about Pink Dot without talking about the cause. So, initially our first media coverage was about Pink Dot gets biggest turnout in Speaker's Corner, and that happened for the first 2 years. And then when Google came to be a Pink Dot sponsor, then they talked about how Google and the first corporate sponsors that sponsoring something so taboo. So we got media coverage, and then it began to die down, and then the Wear White campaign, the anti-Pink Dot campaign came about, and every day we had media coverage, and people knew about us, and we got more numbers that came at the end of the day. And last year we had 18 corporate sponsors, 13 or 14 of which are big MNCs, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, we got banks, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Barclays, and everything. Then last November, the government did a new rule saying that companies that are not Singapore-owned cannot sponsor or cannot help to organize events in Speaker's Corner. And they see sponsorship as helping to organize. So, which means that we have lost all our MNC sponsors. Wow. They all can't come in this year because of the new rules. But it's forcing us to change course. So we are approaching a lot of local companies, local SMEs that are run and opened by younger people that will contribute to this. And we are launching the campaign officially on Sunday, but pre-launch we have quite encouraging response.
That's great.
And I think at the end of the day, a lot of them felt that this wasn't their fight, because the gays they are covered by the likes of Google, Microsoft, Facebook. Why would they need me, small local SME, to help? And when this happened and we say, okay, we lost all this, is this important to you? Do you want to make a stand? And some said no, but a lot has said, yes, sure. Some said, yes. Then they come back, yeah, I've spoken to my PR consultants, and they say no. So, it takes all sorts, but I think it changes, it is forcing us to change the course of Pink Dot. And I think if we are successful this year, we can say that Pink Dot was an event organized by Singaporeans, for Singaporeans, and wholly supported by Singaporeans and Singaporean companies. So that's how we navigate towards our political barriers.
On that very hopeful note, I'd like to open the floor for questions. Let's begin. Can we put the polling result up there? Do you think the rise of populism in the West will curb progress on LGBT rights? In the room, 65% said yes and 35% said no. It's 109 submissions, and let's see the social media results. And 60-40 yes and no. So more or less the same. It's a worrying trend. Questions from the audience? Let's see. Yes, I'm sorry, right there. I can't see anyone.
Hi, this is a question for Oyun Gurel, Sambanu. One of the problems with legislation and protecting minority groups is keeping the dialogue going. And a lot of that is projected from the business community. In Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, it's a very fast developing country with Western or foreign businesses moving in. Are you seeing developments happening quicker because of the ideals that Western or foreign companies are projecting to the government?
I can't say that. So actually it's going reverse and back forth. So whatever happening in the West is happening also in Mongolia. So for example, in 2016, in May, we got a very progressive package law that first time criminalized hate crime and domestic violence. Before that, domestic violence and domestic abuses wasn't considered as a crime. So we got that law passed a year ago, but then election happened, the different party won, and they reversed all those laws. Now we don't have a law on hate crimes and domestic violence being as a crime, but this law is now coming back because we have enough support, public support, to bring that law back, and the current government current majority parliament is actually going to approve that law by July 1. So what we are now seeing is actually whenever politicians reverse the progressive decisions, there are lots of media and public outcry, and they're influencing domestically how to bring the progressive laws back. So we don't, in Ulaanbaatar, the business community is of course paying lots of attention for where's investment coming from, whether it's not coming or not. But in countryside, in the wider Mongolia, it's a domestic fight. It's domestic public opinion plays bigger role.
I think there was another question in that same area. Yes.
Hi, Peter Sargent, Standard Chartered. And I'm sitting next to Betty, who is one of the organisers of Pink Dot in Hong Kong, which is very much done in homage to the great work you've done in Singapore. So congratulations on that, and congratulations on the tack you're taking this year. And I know some of the success you're having in signing up local companies, so may that continue. I have a question particularly around Singapore. So to the extent that companies have had budgets put aside for work with their LGBT staff and through their LGBT networks, have you had any conversations with those same companies that sponsored you last year to help advise them as to what else they can do with those budgets in Singapore, which clearly still exist, because all of us are spending money on diversity and various different streams of diversity. So given the changing environment in Singapore, given the constraints that are put upon you guys in running Pink Dot, how should companies like ourselves look to spend money on this in Singapore?
Well, I mean, the restriction is only to events that are held in the Speaker's Corner. So companies could still donate money to other LGBT organizations. There is a transgender organization that needs money. Uga Chaga that does counseling services, they also need money. So it doesn't need to be Pink Dot only. So it doesn't have to be big publicity, but you could still help. You could also, you're still free to have your diversity programs inside. Another way to help also is to make sure that your vendors are also LGBT friendly. It doesn't make sense if you are an LGBT friendly company and you engage vendors that have discriminatory practices. So that's also one way to influence other local vendors to become more friendly. Yeah.
Okay, we're just about out of time. I'd like to say that what I take away from this session is the importance of, again, of openness, as this morning, and meeting people where they are and respecting people where they are, whether it's arguing logically with the government, whether it's sharing your story with them, whether it's going to local small businesses, meeting people where they are and forging alliances one-on-one. So with that, please thank our panel.